Hey, so here we are, another edition of the Asymmetric Power with Dr. V podcast. And today I have a very special treat for everyone. A very dear friend and esteemed colleague, Dr. Emily Brearley, who is English but now an American citizen, and has vast experience in working in the development world. She is a development economist with a PhD from Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, known to those of us who love it, SAIS. And she's here to shed some light on this, what it means in practice, this whole annihilation of USAID by President Trump. To give this a little bit of, so thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
It's such an honor. To give this a little bit of context, as you know, this podcast is based on the concept of asymmetric power, how nation states and state departments and militaries and others learn to use the different pillars of national power, so that our viewers and listeners can sort of interpret the weekly news through that lens and understand that what they're hearing is a product of a power play. And maybe also then take away from that, like how that power play, what are those things that they can learn to maybe apply in their own lives? So for them to interpret the world around them, and then maybe, power to the people, right?
Yes. You know, Vanessa, I strongly believe in soft power, so I should say that up front. I think it's a great thing. I should lay my cards on the table. I think football diplomacy can be just as important as any other diplomacy. Whenever I wanted to get anything done in my space, I would say to my colleagues, let's get a footballer to put this message out there, because that's who people listen to. So from the get-go, I should state I absolutely love soft power. And in theory, USAID was a great tool for that, for soft power, and that's why it was set up. My problem is that USAID was broken. And when USAID is broken, that means that not only do you not have critical soft power, it almost can turn against you. So people can get angry if projects are failing, or you're treating people badly, or the money is not reaching the people who it's supposed to, the poorest of the poor. That can create resentment. And that's some of the narrative that we're actually hearing right now in the news. I was saying to you, in fact, that it's a bit like the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Yes. They all touch a different part of the elephant, and somebody describes the trunk or the ears or the feet. And you end up thinking, well, is USAID like this amazing thing that's saving African babies with HIV/AIDS? Or is it this terrible thing that's just stealing a bunch of money, and it's a bunch of elite people in DC? Right. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. To state pragmatically, but I err on the side of it's broken. It does a few good things, but it doesn't do enough good things to justify its current makeup. And so I'm not sad, I have to tell you, that this is happening. Also because I've been banging on about these things for 25 years and everyone said, oh, please be quiet, it's not important. And now suddenly it's the most important issue in the news. So I think it's long overdue.
I think your insight is truly key on all this. So just to give it a little bit of context for our viewers and our audience, right? So development is that other D, if you call it midfield, of one of the pillars of national power. It was set up, USAID, by President Kennedy in 1961, and it's part of the Cold War, right? To counter, to help defend democracy, to help counter, Russian infiltration of particularly the Western Hemisphere, and then it later became Africa and Eastern Europe, and sort of the idea that Americans could be seen as good guys and to earn the goodwill of the United States with the local communities in these strategic regions, and that would garner the United States friends and even back channels, right? So even back channels, like even if they elected leaders that were not favorable to US interests, you'd always have someone who benefited from the local project from USAID, and that would help us counter the Russian influence. Arguably, we are in another Cold War, right?
Yes.
Whether you'll consider it Russia or with China, but we're in a great war, great power competition again. So
I agree with that, Vanessa. I think we are still in a Cold War. It's just most people don't realize it. The first Cold War was blatantly obvious because we had the Iron Curtain. Now it's a different shift, and you know this better than I do through media and, you know, various different disinformation sources. So I think that soft power is even more important now, and it's even more important that we get it right. And because I really like the West. Maybe that's also a very unpopular thing to say. I like democracy. I like the OECD countries. I think it's the best place to be a human, especially to be a woman or gay or any of the, you know, more vulnerable sections of society. So I want to keep the Pax Americana going for as long as possible and support it with sensible development policy that really works and really creates strong soft power. And that's not happening right now. And that's always been my problem.
So you're writing a book about this. I don't know if you've finished it.
I've written a book about this, and it's been going on forever, Vanessa, but I have actually, and I was told last year, oh, this is boring. Only Joseph Stiglitz gets to write about development economics. And I was like, well, I've tried to grow a big white beard, but, you know, I just haven't been able to. But maybe now people will realize that this is actually a really important topic. And I like it being placed within a context of soft power. So we can really think about this. These are the things I've thought about for 25 years in my career. You know, what is the role of the West in the global South? How can we be less neo-colonial and creating of dependency? How can we become a good partner, an honest broker? All of these questions are really important. And while USAID, the blow up of it has been very shocking, especially for a lot of people in the sector with me, and I'm very compassionate towards them. I know what it's like to lose your job. It's very stressful. However, and but Vanessa, this industry was always a gig worker economy, especially for the people in the global South, and nobody cared about them all this time. Suddenly, the people who have the most secure jobs have lost them, and now we're hearing about it.
That's right. But you have a colleague, or, you know, another woman, Dambisa Moyo, right?
Yes.
Right. So let's contrast your view with Dambisa Moyo, who is now in the House of Lords.
She's a baroness, indeed.
Baroness.
I adore Dambisa Moyo. I follow her slavishly.
Trade, not aid, right?
Everything she does, dead aid. I pretty much agree with her. And this is something you're seeing in the news, on social media. A lot of people from USAID are speaking up and saying, but we were saving people's lives, we were providing healthcare, we were doing all these things. The question is, should they have been doing that? Did that take away agency from global South governments? If you can afford tanks, you should be able to afford HIV/AIDS healthcare for little babies in your country. And if you're not doing that, then there is a disconnect between you and your people as a government. And by USAID inserting itself in the middle there and taking over, it really does create a dependency, which is what Dambisa proved in her book, which is short and relentless. It's a little bit boring, her book. Mine is hopefully a bit more, you know, funny, but it's not a funny subject. And she just barrels you with a bunch of statistics, which incontrovertibly prove her point that billions have been spent, and for what?
Can you?
Where are the outcomes?
There's also analyses coming out of, you know, like where I have a fellowship at Yale, you know, that show that a lot of that more corruption is stolen out of African countries and the aid that they get. So, and I wrote in my own book that you know, international aid has often been stolen and used by warlords.
It ends up in Swiss bank accounts.
So can you give us an example, given that you're, you know, in my view, the great expert on this, and you have an upcoming book on it? Give us a few examples, in your view, some anecdotes, without naming the guilty or getting yourself into trouble. Give us some examples of where most glaringly on the ground it has gone wrong. Like what did you see and you thought, oh, this is counterproductive and not how it should have gone?
Look, I think that there's a wonderful economist. He's my favorite dead economist. I have a list of favorite dead ones and favorite alive ones. He's my favorite dead economist. It's not Keynes, it's Albert O'Hirschman. And he wrote about development aid. And he said that most projects fail. The vast majority of projects fail.
Why?
So I could tell you, because they lack transparency, they're overly ambitious, and there's no track record of such an intervention working before. Mostly things work if they're extremely simple and they're based on infrastructure. So like the Marshall Plan, we're going to build this bridge, here's some money to build the bridge, we build the bridge. It has to be really, really simple. As soon as you introduce complexity and opacity, human beings, and we are all vulnerable to this, global south, the west, I don't care how good you think you are, if you're a good person working in a broken system, it's broken.
And I want to that you have a company, a consultancy called Solution 42 for all Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans out there. And your motto is simple solutions to complex problems. So let me push back and follow up on what you just said. Do you think that instead of a USAID, where do we go from here? Should we have more a Belt and Road Initiative a la China? Would that be more productive to the United States? Do we want the development office folded into these State Department, but differently, a little bit more internal, the way the Brits have done it with in UK aid into their foreign office, such that it's now the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office? Is there another model out there that you think we should pursue in the wake of a decimated USAID, arguing that soft power is important? It is one of the pillars of national power, and it can do a lot of good. So, Dr. Brearley, what should we do next?
This might sound shocking to you, but right now, Belt and Road is kicking our butts. And one recent example was that China went to Peru and said, oh, you want $3 billion to build a new port? Here you go. And by contrast, the Biden administration gave them a couple of old Black Hawk helicopters. These are our close neighbors. This is our neighborhood, which I think our new first Latino Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, gets. He understands that we need to pull our friends close and be wary of our enemies. So yes, I think a Belt and Road Initiative type of approach, because it's enough money to really build the big things that countries need, and it should be big enough that everybody can observe whether it's happening or not, and money doesn't go missing. Now, I will say quickly that the Belt and Road has resulted in huge indebtedness of countries, especially in Africa, to China, and we don't like that. So, the details have to be very carefully considered, but we certainly have to be far more strategic. We have to lend enough money that it actually matters and stop pretending that the wide disbursement over a range of ideological and pet projects actually works. It doesn't. It becomes less than the sum of its parts, even when good people want to do good things. And I repeat that because I've worked with lots of bad people too. I mean, there's lots of evil people in the development business, as any other business, because there's power to be had. But I also think there are good people who have their hearts in the right place. And that's why especially I want to fix this sector, because, DOD, we know DOD is also corrupt, but they never said that they were the good guys. They were like, yeah, hi, our job is to kill people. USAID said, we are saving the world. We are saving the babies. And they won. They mostly won, and that's what is the problem.
Give me an example of how you saw that or something that failed. I mean, I was involved a long time ago with UNICEF, tetanus immunization programs in in Tanzania. I did everything from the fundraising in London to helping install the little fridges, and
Yeah.
many miles away from electricity. And by the way, we had Manchester United, T-shirts of Manchester United supporting
Oh,
the
wicked.
tennis thing.
Sorry. Sorry,
to-
I support Norwich City, even though they always lose. I was born there. I'll tell you something that worked and something that didn't.
Correct.
The
Thank
thing
you.
that didn't work, Kamala Harris led this initiative in Central America. And it was all about market systems and investing so that communities could grow and create jobs so people wouldn't come over the border. And she was actually helped by then Ajay Banja, led the MasterCard NGO. And it didn't work because it was economically illiterate and didn't understand what was preventing growth in those markets. And it was a lack of security. At that time, Guatemala, Honduras, the country where I'm in now, Nicaragua, there's a reason why people are leaving, and there's a reason why middle-class people with businesses are leaving. And if you don't address basic security, which is your realm and why I like working, with different expertise, it's absolutely important. It's not going to work. And it didn't work. It failed. And that was millions of dollars. And it was purely because an ideological approach was taken that was economically illiterate. I don't know what they did at USAID, but I used to be the only economist in the room often, and especially at the Beltway Bandits, which have a kind of
bandits. I've used the term.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear the term explained to you.
Beltway Bandits it's where the money ends up. They are the implementing partners of USAID. They are the vultures that pick off the flesh of USAID, and they implement. So most of the money from USAID ends up within the Beltway in Washington, D.C. It doesn't get to the end user, or the recipient, intended recipient. And I said this in my blog on LinkedIn, that a lot of my friends in the Global South have said, well, we didn't get the money anyway. So most of the whining and the wailing and the clutching of pearls has been within the Beltway, because suddenly the gravy train stops. Now, there's a justified comeback at that, hey, well, look at DOD. Look at the Beltway Bandits that feed off the flesh of DOD. They're echelons bigger. They never said they were the good guys. They never said they were about soft power, and USA did. And this is my sector, and I'm a lefty tree hugger, granola bar eater, and I want us to do good things, even if they're smaller, even if there's less things on the list. One good thing that actually works is so much more important than 20 that fail.
So give us an example of one that worked. You said you had
the one that worked.
One that worked.
Yes, it's juicy because it involves Ivanka Trump. Ivanka Trump, as people might have forgotten, went to work at USAID and basically took over the women's portfolio and kicked ass because she was Ivanka Trump, and everybody was terrified. I've worked on gender or women's empowerment for 25 years. It's been a through thread of my career, because often women are the most vulnerable. They're in, the poorest areas, etc. We're 4 billion people in the world, so why not focus on women? And it's like the redheaded stepchild. No one really cares about it. Women's stuff doesn't get much money. There's a lot of BS when it comes to that issue, which really annoys me. And I've told most of the young women I mentor, I've told them not to put it on their CV. Ivanka comes in and she calls a meeting, and the finance minister shows up. Normally it's like the secretary of the women's ministry, nobody bothers to go to these meetings. But Ivanka went, and she leveraged, X20, X50 financial resources for these women-focused projects just by being who she is.
And did the resources, in your opinion, get to where they needed to go? Were they?
I don't know. I would have to go back, but just the very fact that she got important people in a room making commitments to leverage this finance I'd never seen it in my career. before, and I've never seen it since. Women's issues were suddenly important because she said they were. She used her power, her bully pulpit, to great effect. And sadly, my colleagues at USAID, who are mostly Democrats, didn't like it because they didn't like her and they didn't like her dad. And I was saying, and I got in lots of trouble for saying, I was like, I don't care. We are getting money for things we care about. The issue that we care about is being put to the top of the list. I even felt at that point that she could perhaps get, maternity leave for American women, because that was also a big issue. Right. She was really bright. She knew her brief. She was on top of her brief. She spoke eloquently. She was really well put together. Like, her makeup game is exceptional. Maybe she has a makeup artist. I mean, you can look great, right, when you have a hairdresser, makeup artist. But the point is that I felt her heart was in the right place and she was effective. She was effective. People listened. The finance ministers came to those meetings, and they never do that. They don't care about silly women. Let the women go do artesania.
Yes, exactly. No, I'm familiar with the phenomenon. And I think that's one of the reasons why you and I became friends, because we're two women who will not be quiet. We will not sit quietly in the corner.
No, I don't like knitting. I mean, I like watching people knitting, but I'm bad at knitting.
I refuse to admit to being able to sew, cook, or clean. So
yeah. Oh, I'm actually really good at cleaning. I'm so good at it.
Although I do it. I do it as a single mother. It does fall upon me, but still, I hate to admit it. So before we wrap up, because I think there's a lot more to talk about, and I think you and I should do a lot more podcasts together on some of these issues, and how how these news stories impact our lives, and how we should look at them and understand them, and what are the key takeaways for our listeners of lessons learned on not just the critical thinking about the news stories, but maybe lessons learned about things that they can apply in their own world, right? So you basically said that USAID was effective under Ivanka Trump because you had a very powerful, emotive speaker who was able to convene. So one of the things is, if you want your project well funded and well run, or at least well funded, choose the head, choose the speaker, right? That's
or get David Beckham, or whoever the most famous footballer is right now. I don't know who the footballer is right now. Mbappe, yeah, because
Mbappe,
that little
who's just come to Madrid, and previously it was Bellingham, the Brit at Real Madrid.
Yes.
Yeah.
So no, Mbappe's awesome. Need to get his phone number. I have some key messages for him to.
No, I mean, football diplomacy was key in Africa, for instance, and the Middle East. So I'd like to sort of wrap this up, not to make it too long, and we can always have a follow-on. We can always see how this story develops and see what comes next with development. And I hope you'll come on and help me discuss other things. And I think and maybe you and I can bring on other guests. So to wrap up, what do you think, in your view, whether you turn out to be right or wrong, or events go your way or not, do you think what should the US do about USAID next, now that they've literally taken the sign off the door?
I think that they are already doing what they should be doing. So Samantha Power should have done this audit over 4 years calmly, and didn't. I used to adore her. She was one of my idols, and now not so much, because that was a missed opportunity. A woman leading USAID, what a dream. And it didn't turn out that way. So they need to audit. We need to understand what happened to the money. You can speak to, again, lots of blind people, and I'm a blind person, and you'll get a million different opinions, but we won't know until we see the data. So let's continue with the audit. They're going to put USAID under the Department of State, which I think is correct, because it was so off-piste and doing all these crazy things. But then America really has to think carefully about soft power and how it projects it. I really hope that aid doesn't get thrown in the bin, because the American public are so fed up and think it's such a waste of time, and also feeling the effects of inflation, etc. I truly do understand when you're living on the edge of poverty yourself in America, why should you be told that your money has to go somewhere where you're never going to go and you don't care about them? That doesn't mean Americans are selfish. It just or mean or whatever. They're Americans. I find to be very generous as people, but I do understand that there might be some fatigue, some aid fatigue. So I really hope that we can reconstitute the Pax Americana soft power writ large, with some really sensible projects that Americans can see make sense.
Exactly. And some better ROI, return on investment, support that employs locals and also enables American goods to be exported there, then that's an ROI that most American people can get behind, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think it's time for us to go, but I'll see you very soon, Dr. Emily Brearley of Solution 42. And what's the title of your upcoming book? Or does it have a
I think I'm going to call it Aid Inferno.
Aid Inferno. I love it.
Yes. I had a much more complicated
I'm sure your editors
title.
will have some opinions, but Aid Inferno is a great working title.
I spoke to some 20-year-olds and they rejected all my longer, more academic titles, and that's what we ended up with.
I like it. I love it. I love it. And thank you so much for your time, and we will see you very soon. Thank you, Dr. Brearley. Thank you, Emily.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.